I'm Scott Snibbe, and this is A Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment. Last year, I had the privilege to participate in a dialogue on compassion with my teacher, Venerable Sangye Khadro. She's also well known by her Western name, Venerable Kathleen McDonald. Venerable Sangye Khadro is the author of How to Meditate and Awakening the Kind Heart. She's a very active Buddhist teacher and a fully ordained nun, which is the highest level of ordination for a Buddhist monastic. It was wonderful to hear her share her wisdom on this topic, which touched on many practical ways to deal with everyday pain and conflict in our lives using this universal antidote of compassion. This talk was organized by the Foundation for Compassion and Wisdom, which shares similar goals to A Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment in sharing non-religious ways for anyone to benefit from Buddhist wisdom. Make sure to stay tuned until the end of the episode for a short but moving meditation on compassion led by Venerable Sangye Khadro.
Well, perhaps we can just dive in with the first question I want to explore with you. Turning first to you, Venerable Sangye Khadro, what would you say is the purpose of meditation? Why should we do it?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm very happy to be part of this discussion. So that's kind of a big question because there's many different kinds of meditation, different reasons that people would have for practicing meditation. And I'm knowledgeable about Buddhism. So within the context of Buddhism, the real purpose of meditation is to get in touch with our pure nature. So we have within us a lot of positive energy and positive potential. And it's possible to get in touch with that, develop it, make it grow more and more, make it more part of our life so that we're happier and more peaceful and better able to help others. So that's kind of putting it in a nutshell. But yeah, there's a lot more that could be said.
Thank you. And Scott, why do you meditate? What's it brought into your life?
Thanks. So first of all, thanks for inviting me to this. Second of all, I do want everyone to know that Venerable Sangye Khadro is my teacher and my hero. So much of what I'll say, I learned from her, and I just put into kind of simpler terms for very much towards people who might never become Buddhists, but would like to benefit from these same techniques. So the question is, why do you meditate? I think that's a really important question. And, the definition of meditation, or definition of one form of meditation in Buddhism, is familiarizing the mind with virtue. And I think that's very important because a lot of people today may think meditation is about focus only, but it is possible to focus on some non-virtue or, even focus on something quite bad, They actually even use mindfulness training to train soldiers so that they don't, shake when they're trying to shoot somebody. So I think that aspect is very important to meditation, that it's focusing on virtue. And also the outcomes. I remember asking Venerable Sangye Khadro once, how do you tell if your meditation practice is working? She said, your relationships get better. And I really like that answer because we can think that meditation is an inward solitary experience, which it is on the cushion. But the result of it should be something you actually can notice outside, in that your connections to other people get stronger. You can see inwardly that you become more peaceful and open and present, but outwardly your connections with others become stronger. And also you make the world a better place, that actually your actions start to want to do good in the world in whatever ways that you can. So
can I just add that actually came from Lama Yeshe?
Oh, yeah.
Once asked, how do you know if you're meditating properly and your meditation is going in the right direction? And he said, yeah, you should see there's more kindness, more compassion, better relationships with others. So I really loved that answer and wanted to share it with others as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of leads up neatly onto my next question, which was, we may see that there's so many problems and challenges in the world right now. It can almost seem overwhelming what's going on around us. And a Buddhist view is that these problems come from our mind. And my reaction would be, well, hey, not my mind. So how do we understand that relationship with what we see outside of us and these challenges and what's going on within our own mind? Where's that connection? And therefore, how do we find the courage to start addressing some of these challenges? Maybe turn to you, Scott. What do you feel about that?
I would tend to defer to let Venerable Sangye Khadro answer first.
Sorry, very
Hey, let Venerable answer all the questions first, and I can add a few jokes afterwards.
Yeah, well, that's a really, again, a complex question. And I mean, there's two ways we can look at it. One is in terms of karma. So that's a really big part of Buddhism, that what we experience is the result of our own karma. So if we're having a bad experience, that's, bad karma we created in the past. Good experiences are the result of good karma. But karma itself is such a complex topic. There's many permutations and many different factors that go into that. So you really need to study karma to make sense of how our karma, the karma in our mind, brings about experiences we have in the outer world. But another way of understanding this question is the way our mind perceives things. And this is something we can see in our own experience. For example, you go to a movie with a friend or a group of friends, and you're sitting there, you're watching the movie together, and you come out and you discuss it. And some people say, oh, that was a great movie, the best movie I ever saw. And somebody else will say, oh, that was horrible. I couldn't bear it. I wanted to get up and walk out. So, the way we experience things, whether it's movies or music or food or, looking at the world around us, depends on our own mind, what's going on in our own mind, our thoughts and our emotions and so on. And so that's another way we can understand the role that our mind plays in how things appear to us. And the wonderful thing is we can change our mind. We can change the way we perceive things. So, we don't have to see things as bad. Problems, Buddhism says problems and difficult experiences can actually become part of our practice, part of our spiritual development to increase our compassion, our wisdom, and so on. So there's lots of tools we can use to, transform our mind. And when our mind transforms, the way we see the world and experiences, things that happen to us, will transform as well. So, there's lots and lots of tools for doing this in Buddhism, especially under the topic called thought transformation, lojong in Tibetan. So look into that if you're interested in seeing the world in a better way.
Yeah, it's reminding me of something I read about His Holiness was speaking in his book Beyond Religion. He said, with karma, there are so many causes and conditions, you can't possibly know what is going to be the result of one particular action because there are so many factors in play. And so he said, what you can control is your intention, your motivation. So if you're really clear on that, then you can almost let go of the result, and because you're not going to be able to control that. Do you think that's true, Scott?
Yeah, I liked how you asked your question, because it's kind of saying, are the world's problems coming from my own mind? Mm-hmm. But if you read His Holiness has written all these wonderful books now with Venerable Thubten Chodron going into great depth about every topic. And, the simple way to look at it is that all of human actions come from our mind, right? Every single thing anybody does comes from a mental decision. So if you slightly change, your question and say, oh, all solutions come from the mind, then doesn't that seem a lot harder to disagree with? Because, yeah, of course, the solution to every problem is going to come from a decision that an individual person makes. Because karma is so mysterious, but essentially it says so many causes and conditions come together and result in someone making a decision and doing something. So to say that all our problems come from people making decisions and doing things, and all our solutions too, I think that's quite understandable. And His Holiness, I've heard His Holiness asked many times when I was seeing him in person, people said, how do I end war, for example? And His Holiness, at least when I was there, he said the same thing every time. He said, make up with the people you have conflicts with. He said that is the greatest cause for ending war on the planet. I mean, we have, one in Ukraine right now. And of course, we should do other things and protests and donate and so on. But he said the strongest cause is actually in your own minds, because conflicts come from individuals disagreeing and fighting and getting angry with each other. So I think that's the essence of the Buddhist view, is that that is the place to start. If you find that you're in conflict with the people around you, especially the people closest to you, then you're probably not going to be a cause for harmony in the greater world.
Right. And it kind of, it speaks to like the topic of this webinar, which is meditate with compassion. So when you're meditating, it's with a compassionate, focus. And I'm just want to bring that in now. How important when you're meditating is it to forgive yourself and let go of guilt and so forth? Venerable Sangye Khadro, do you have any experience with people who start to meditate and they start to feel too much shame or guilt or anxiety? And what's your advice around that?
Well, I have that experience myself.
Okay.
So, yeah, I've had to struggle a lot with being hard on myself and not forgiving myself. And yeah, so what I came to realize at one point is that if I can't forgive myself for my imperfections, my faults, my mistakes, then it's very hard to forgive others. And that's something I did want to do. I realized pretty early on that hanging on to anger and hatred and resentment and those kind of negative feelings towards others, even if they do awful things, that's just making yourself suffer. Yeah, it's like, I like the analogy of holding hot coals in your hands, right? Mm-hmm. Holding on to anger, holding on to hatred is like holding hot coals in your hands. And you say, ouch, this hurts. Well, you can drop them. You don't have to let them. You can let them go. And so that's a wonderful realization to come to, that if we hold on to anger and don't forgive, then we are making ourselves suffer. It's painful. Anger and hatred are painful states of mind. And the good news is we don't have to hold on to them. We don't have to continue dwelling in those kinds of thoughts and emotions. There's ways we can stop being angry. And again, Buddhism is just full of methods. There's whole books about how to deal with anger, how to overcome anger. And so there's lots of these methods. We have to use them, of course. They're not going to do any good if they're just sitting in the book or sitting on the shelf. We have to bring them into our mind, into our heart, and work on them. And it takes time. It's not easy. Sometimes it can take years, sometimes even one's whole life, to let go of anger or grudges towards others. But anyway, a big part of that is also learning to forgive ourselves, letting go of anger and hatred and resentment towards our own self, for our own mistakes. Sometimes it's easier to forgive others than to forgive ourselves. Sometimes, we're more kind to others than we are to ourselves. So is that right?
I've heard in other webinars we've done, speakers talking about how hard we are on ourselves, and how I myself find when I try to meditate, I thought, oh, I'm feeling really not very positive about myself right now. I'm going to send myself some love. It's just so hard. It's like there's almost a block there that I'm not supposed to do that. You can't direct it towards yourself. It should be directed towards others. But then if you don't have that sense of forgiveness and love for yourself, how can you then give that to others? How can you be a source of comfort and happiness to others? What do you think of that, Scott?
I agree. Yeah. I think it's very difficult to treat anybody else better than you treat yourself. So to cultivate that kind of love for yourself, it's mostly by accident, that you hurt other people, but it happens like all day. Yeah, different times all day long. So, but I think like cultivating that real love for yourself and a tenderness. And I was doing it last night because I was leading a meditation on compassion at the local Buddhist center. And like one way that can be really effective for me and other people is to see yourself as if you're another person. Imagine an image of yourself in front of you and all your problems, and think, what would you say if that was my friend? And it's really surprising how different it is what you'd say. So if you keep practicing that way, you start treating yourself more nicely, like, oh, you have so many good qualities, and you do so every day is like 99% good, 1% bad, and look at your whole life, all the good things you've done. Even by just not doing bad things each day, you do so much good. So that's really important.
It's such an important point. I mean, do we spend enough time rejoicing about the things that we're doing right? Do we spend enough time doing that? Or we're just constantly beating ourselves up all the time? That's not helpful.
Yeah. So there's a purification practice that, we Buddhists do at least once a day, sometimes twice. And then also just whenever something goes wrong. But I think, yeah, because to combine that with rejoicing is really important, because even if it's always purification, still it can become a little negative because you only think of your negativity. So to sort of first rejoice in all the good that you did during the day, and then to let go, to have some, I don't know how, honestly, how people do it without some kind of meditation, like a purification practice, because you need some way, somehow to let go and process and forgive yourself every day.
Well, I've heard of people running, and that's their form of meditation for the day, and people doing some form of exercises.
Art also, surfing. There are different ways to meditate besides on a cushion,
Mm-hmm. And then let's talk more about, say, compassion now. So what role do you think compassion has in both healing ourselves and our world? How important is it to meditate on compassion right now? Venerable Sangye Khadro, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think definitely, it's just so core to Buddhism to have an attitude of kindness and compassion for all living beings, including ourselves. We are a living being too, so we shouldn't leave ourselves out of that. But in all forms of Buddhism, that's very much emphasized. In fact, it's the basis of ethics. Ethics is a very important practice in Buddhism, and it's not so explicitly mentioned, but to me, it seems that the basis of ethics is compassion, recognizing that nobody wants to suffer. Even this little insect crawling on the table or crawling on the floor, it just wants to stay alive. It doesn't want to suffer. And if we do something harmful, destructive, that causes suffering to another being, that's the worst thing we can do. And so, and when we harm others, we also harm ourselves. That's something we need to look at. We're going against our own true nature. We can't feel really good about ourselves if we are engaging in harmful actions, causing suffering to others. And so, kindness and compassion are super important. And again, like what Lama Yeshe said, that's the way to tell if your meditation is going well, if you are becoming more kind and more compassionate. And he said, on the other hand, if you're becoming more impatient, more bad-tempered, your relationships with others are getting worse, then there's something wrong. You're doing something wrong in your practice. So I thought that's a really great line. And also, I want to put in a plug for one of Pema Chodron's books, which is called How to Meditate, a Practical Guide to Making Friends with Your Mind. And I really love that subtitle, Making Friends with Your Mind, or Making Friends with Yourself. Yeah, think about that. Imagine what that would be like to be friends with yourself. It's like Scott was saying, it's really helpful to imagine yourself as if you were another person, a friend, and how you would treat that person. Would you constantly disparage that person, pointing out their faults? Oh, you're so bad. You're so awful. Is that a good way to be friends with somebody? And yet this is what we do to ourselves. Although I don't think it's something we do deliberately and consciously. It's just a habit that we get into. So it's good to recognize when we are being self-critical and self-hating and say, no, this isn't the way I want to be. I want to change this. And again, there's ways of doing that, lots of ways within Buddhism. And also Kristin Neff, American psychologist and meditator. She's done research on self-compassion, wrote a book about self-compassion, has a website about self-compassion. So you can find a lot of resources there in case you're having difficulty being compassionate to yourself.
Yeah, have heard of her. I think she's got some great resources. And I think she really understands this need amongst us to start with ourselves, and that's okay to do that, and to have this attitude of compassion for ourselves, because that's a good starting point. I think often when we reach join a spiritual path, we kind of jump over that bit and just try to focus on other people and sort of skip that part about, looking at our own pain and our own issues that we need to deal with first. Scott, do you have a view on compassion in that way?
Yeah, well, His Holiness says if you want to be happy, cherish others. Like it's a bumper sticker, but I think it's so deep and difficult to understand, actually, because it's not the way we're raised in our culture. Like in our culture, I think genuinely we're raised to think you need many, many things from outside to be happy. And all those things obviously do contribute to happiness, but not actually to the deepest happiness. Like there's a quote from Shantideva that says something like, all happiness comes from serving others and all pain comes from selfishness. But do we really believe that, right? Like, I think you want to really think about, I did, when I first read those things, I went and really, really thought about it, and I found it to be true. Like, I looked at the things I felt best about in my whole life, and there were like this few moments where you did something totally selfless that you really didn't have to do to help somebody else. And I still think back, there are not that many things like that, but I still think back to those few things, and it gives me a really good feeling. And it's not like in our Declaration of Independence in the US, it says you have like the right to happiness, but doesn't explain how to get.
Yeah. How do you get there? Right. Yeah.
So like, this is the way to get there. And it's just there are many seeming paradoxes in Buddhism that, the way to be blissfully happy is to dedicate your life to others and helping others, or to whatever extent you can, to do 5% or 10%. Still that has an extraordinary impact on your life.
There has to be a balance as well, right? When you start losing your joy or feeling taken advantage of, then you need to readdress that balance, right? What would you say about that, Venerable Sangye Khadro? You're actually feeling depleted. Are you getting into sort of idiot compassion there, where you're just giving in to everybody and not standing up for yourself? How do you deal with that, or is that not something you deal with?
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely there needs to be a balance. And in fact, I once heard a Western psychologist talk about how people who come from dysfunctional families where there's codependence, and if they grew up in a family like that, they may have this compulsion to be helping others all the time, and not taking care of themselves. So this is kind of a particular mode of being. And he said when that kind of person gets into Buddhism and they hear about the Bodhisattva's path, they think, oh yeah, that's what I have to do. I have to help all sentient beings. I have to become enlightened, help all sentient beings. But if they never learned how to take care of themselves, then they can end up going wrong. Like they burn out, or their underlying motivation for helping others isn't 100% correct. It's somewhat out of balance. And so, yes, it's definitely very important, especially as Westerners, I think, that we keep that balance of taking care of ourselves, our own needs, and also taking care of others, not neglecting ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Scott? Do you strike a balance? Is that easy?
Yeah. Well, my teacher, Venerable Rene Fusey, who's a contemporary of Venerable Sangye Khadro, another student of Lama Yeshe, he told me once that if you're going to do a 1-week retreat, you should take a 1-week vacation before. So, which I don't think a lot of people do. But I think like that's very important. Like, I'm here in California, so I think we can teach people a lot about relaxing and having a good time.
Yeah.
It's very, very important to enjoy your life, actually, and enjoy everything about life. And what's beautiful about Mahayana Buddhism is it teaches you how to do those things without guilt. Even if you're enjoying a walk on the beach, a nice piece of cake, to do what's called universalizing. Like as you enjoy things in life, you imagine, oh, if everybody could have this thing, that's a way not to feel guilty about enjoying the incredible privilege a lot of us have, to think, oh, I wish everyone had a nice house like this. I wish everybody had a nice meal like this. Obviously, you don't want to do it in a narcissistic way where then you just kick back the whole time and enjoy. You have to actually go out and make some efforts to get other people to also be able to enjoy those things too. But to guiltlessly enjoy your life and use the techniques of Mahayana Buddhism in particular, which can be done in a secular form, to see everything in life as, a source of joy and happiness, and even connecting with others, even when others aren't around, to imagine that you could benefit others.
I really love what you said there about offering or sharing or universalizing. I love that. It's almost like it liberates you. You're not like holding on to something. It's going out there. It's more opening, like a heart opening. I love that. That's really great. Can I turn to something else now? Sometimes when I wake up in the morning and maybe got an anxious or heavy mindset. So if you wake up like that, what steps do you take to start dealing with that kind of a mind that's like, Venerable Sangye Khadro, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, actually, in the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, right at the beginning of the Lamrim, there's a meditation on the preciousness of the human life. And that's followed by meditation on death. And so those two together are very, very powerful, because if you meditate on them and you get an understanding of them, then what that means is we're really, really fortunate just to be alive, just to have this life. Often we take that for granted. And I once attended a talk by Thich Nhat Hanh where he spoke about how fortunate we are just to have our arms and our legs and our hands and our feet. You know, there are people who don't have those, or who are disabled and are unable to use them. So it's just such a simple thing, but I thought it's really profound, you know, just I have hands that I can use. How difficult it would be if I couldn't use one or both of my hands. My eyes are still working. I can still see. How difficult it would be if I couldn't see. Or hearing, yeah. So just to look at what we do have in our life, just with this body, just with this life, it's amazing. And also then Buddhism says the real purpose of having a human life, a precious human life with the chance to practice Dharma, is to do just that, you know, to practice Dharma, follow the spiritual path as much as we can, develop our potential for enlightenment, and use our life to benefit others. So it's really good to kind of get into the habit of doing that kind of contemplation first thing in the morning, thinking, wow, look at this, I'm still alive. Not everybody wakes up in the morning. There are people who die during the night. Yeah, even if they're not sick. I know a couple of people that happen to, and yeah, just waking up in the morning, still having this body, this life, the opportunities that we have. So it's like focusing on the good in our life, or counting our blessings, that expression we have in English. And then also having this awareness that we don't know how long we have. This life is going to end at some point. We don't know when it's going to end. And so that shouldn't make us feel anxious and, you know, frightened, but just to realize life is precious. Each day, each hour, each minute is precious. Let's make the best of it. Let's really use it well for our own benefit and for the benefit of others. So making a habit of having thoughts like that first thing in the morning is very helpful to clear away any anxiety or negative feelings that we might have.
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just wondering if I can bring in some audience members. If anybody has a question on what we've been discussing so far, please can you use your raising of the hand, I think it is, and then we'll hopefully find you and you can ask a question of Venerable Sangye Khadro or Scott. Yeah, Rose. I think Rose has one. Rose Finley. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah.
Hi, Rose.
Hi. Thank you very much. That's wonderful, useful stuff. I'm concerned about me and other people and what is unconscious to me. It manifests in all kinds of ways. Of course it does. But the process of becoming more conscious is part of the practice. But for some of us, the unconscious stuff is pretty profound and can lead to very, very destructive stuff. So how do you, other than signing up to be a nun or the full Lamrim experience, what do you suggest?
It's a great question, Rose. Thank you. Venerable Sangye Khadro, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, my experience, I've been in Buddhism almost 50 years now. And yeah, there's often new material coming up in my mind that it may have been there before, I just didn't notice it, or it was just deeply buried and it's now coming to the surface. And yeah, it can be quite upsetting sometimes to see this stuff in yourself, like, oh, I didn't know I was like that. And, you know, you could kind of want to get rid of it, push it away, but that doesn't help. So a couple of things that I've found really helpful. One is a book by Tara Brach called Radical Acceptance. She's a psychologist, but also a Buddhist meditator and teacher. And it's all about, accepting whatever you notice in yourself, which is quite hard to do. And yet we have to do it, because if we can't accept those things in ourselves, then when it comes to seeing them in others, we will have difficulty accepting that as well. And we'll feel anger, hatred, hostility, or fear, and so on and so forth. So we have to learn to accept everything in ourselves, although it's not easy. So that's one resource that's very helpful. Another book that I really love is by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's called No Mud, No Lotus, The Art of Transforming Suffering. And so that's full of useful advice in very simple terms about how to deal with difficulties, whether it's difficulties coming from outside or sickness or internal things like within our own mind. So he gives a lot of very, very helpful advice on how to deal with those things.
Thank you. And Scott, can I turn to you? Do you have any advice on this topic?
Yeah. I mean, it's similar advice. That Tara Brach is fantastic. She has the audio course, Radical Self-Acceptance, which is very, very good to go through. And I've done my own personal retreats on that a few times. But I think, because sometimes in my meditation, I notice my mind going over, like in the morning, some problems from yesterday. Like, I'm married, so like I was mad at my wife about something. And I've noticed it's good to not ruminate on that, but also not just bury it, but just watch that, just watch those feelings and try to just accept them without clinging to them or exaggerating and growing them, and look for the feelings underneath of what I'm feeling. Like, oh, I mean, it's very tender. It kind of makes you cry sometimes. Like, oh, I want to be loved. I want to be loved by my wife. I want her to pay attention to me. Like there's something tender. That's what Tara Brach says, right? Like there's something really tender beneath all of our pain and conflict. That's a very simple meditation technique. And if you have some elaborate meditation practice, I've found sometimes it's good to let go of that when you have all these things going on and spend, I was supposed to do some advanced practice in the morning, but just spend an hour like doing that until it kind of winds itself out. And what I find is there's not necessarily any catharsis in that moment, but I notice when I come downstairs to my wife, when I see her, I just feel love. Like it's somehow it does process, and it's a bit of a alchemical experience. It's a little weird the way meditation works, because it's not totally obvious that it would work that way. But if you let the things move by without exaggerating them and without burying them, and try to find the feelings underneath. The other thing that some people do that is really helpful is to focus on the body, because problems will manifest as like pains in the body. So to really see, like, it's not just like a pain in your knee, like it actually might be, trauma from something that happened with your father. So many people have like said this to me, and I think I found it really to be true, that looking at your body sometimes and just relax into that pain or not or whatever, sometimes that will have a kind of alchemical release too.
Thank you.
There's a question from one of the Spanish speakers, Rafa.
Please go ahead, Rafa.
So I'm going to ask for him because he has put it in the chat in Spanish. So I'm just going to translate it into English, if that's okay, so that he can translate the answer. So he's asking, how can we accept the decisions that the people that we love when we think these decisions are wrong? So we disagree with the decisions that people we love make. So how can we accept that?
What I heard, just to check, is if there are people we love, we care about, they make decisions that we don't agree with.
That's right. Yeah. So how can we sort of work with that and, I guess let them have that decision or, without agreeing with them, but sort of accept them. So how can we work with that?
Yeah. Wow. That's kind of a complex question. I mean, what comes to my mind is that we have to see if this decision is going to affect us or not. If it's something related to ourself, it's going to affect ourself, our own life, then I think we should communicate with the other person and explain our own feelings and maybe problems or difficulties we may have if we had to go along with that decision. Do this in a non-angry, non-threatening way, but just to communicate to the other person, how this decision that they made will affect us, and see if we can work out a solution that we're both agreeable to. On the other hand, if the decision is nothing to do with us, they've just decided to do something and it's not going to impact us and affect us, then again, is it going to harm them? Yeah, we might be concerned that if they follow this decision, it's going to bring harm onto them. So again, I think we might try to communicate our concern. And it could be they've made a very rash, impetuous decision without thinking carefully about the consequences. So we might try to point out the consequences that this decision may have on them and see if maybe they'll think about it more carefully. On the other hand, if it's something that isn't going to be harmful to them or to anybody else, it's just something they feel like doing, then we might not like it. We might disagree with it, but maybe it's better to keep quiet. So to me, it seems like there's just a lot of different possibilities. It's a very, very open-ended question. And I think we have to look at what that decision is, who it's going to impact, whether it's going to be harmful or not. So I think it's difficult to give a black and white answer to that kind of question. We just have to bring in as much compassion and wisdom as we can to deal with that situation.
Scott, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, I think, if you read a very, very insightful novel, you often kind of love all the characters, even the bad guys, because you understand their motivation. Like you understand why they did what they did. And I think like that, going obviously beyond things that are like direct trauma or attack, something very dangerous, but in terms of just understanding like why someone voted for someone you didn't and things like that, to really understand that everyone acts on their own internal logic and causes and conditions, and their decisions make sense to them. And if you find yourself saying, I don't understand why, my mom voted for Trump or something like that, work to understand that, because there is a reason, there's a logic to it. It's that person isn't, and yeah, maybe they're mentally ill. It's possible that's the reason, but even so, that is a reason. But probably there's a more subtle logic to why the person did that. So I think looking at causes and conditions, because they say like, if you really understood the life that every person led, there's no way you could get mad at anybody, because you'd see how their actions, however awful and harmful, made sense to them. It wouldn't mean you wouldn't work hard against them or to stop it or anything like that. It doesn't mean you let them do something harmful, but you would understand why they did it. And actually that understanding would help you counteract it better and say the right things and do the right things to perhaps set that straight if it really is something wrong.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Scott. It's reminding me of something I read in His Holiness's book, Beyond Religion, when he says, when he's faced with a difficult decision, he tries to look at it from all different angles. So sometimes we're very focused on, yep, this is the right thing to do. And then we don't actually consider it from another point of view or another point of view. And I love what you just said there about, you can't really walk in someone else's shoes. You can try to see where they're coming from and what's going on in their mind to try to make your own view a little bit more broad and less narrow in its focus. Can I turn now to Sheila? I believe Sheila has a question. Sheila Odyssey, would you like to unmute, ask a question?
Yeah.
See you. Hi.
So thank you. Hi. Thank you, Victoria, Scott, Venerable. So my question is, Scott mentioned that His Holiness, and I'm paraphrasing, said to make up with people you have conflict with. And I just wonder if you have any suggestions for people that don't want to make up, that you approach them, you extend the olive branch, and they reject it. How to deal with that kind of situation?
Great question. Venerable Sangye Khadro, you have any advice?
Yeah, I had some difficulty hearing all the words, but let me see if I understood. You're asking if there's someone you don't want to make up with, if you have a problem with somebody and you don't actually want to reach out to them and reconcile with them, what to do with that? Is that what you're saying?
No, just the opposite. You want to reconcile and they don't.
Oh, okay.
You reach out to them and they reject that.
Yeah. Well, I think in that situation, we just have to accept that. What I would do, and if that was my case, because I've been in a few situations like that, I really try to work on my own attitude, my own motivation, my own intention, try to clear away anger and negative feelings, and also try to clear away expectations. Yeah, you might have this strong expectation. I want to have a good relationship with that person. I want them to forgive me. I want everything to be okay. So if you have that kind of expectation, that might be dangerous because it may not work out that way. And then you could get disappointed and then you could get angry all over again. And so it's best to try to clear away any expectations of what the outcome will be and just really make sure that you have this sincere wish for the other person to be happy and then have an open mind that, yeah, it could be that they don't want to make up with you. They don't want to reconcile. They want to continue being angry at you. Just have that awareness, that expectation, because that's where their mind is at. And then just reach out and try your best to communicate with the other person, apologize for mistakes that you've made and say, you would like to resolve the situation, reconcile with them and so on. But then just be prepared for how they're going to respond. But it's also helpful to understand that, impermanence, they may respond in a certain way at this moment, but later on, at some point later in time, they might come around and change their mind and be willing to communicate more openly with you. So that kind of thing can take time. So those are just thoughts that come up in my mind.
Thank you.
Is there anything to add to that?
Yeah, and this is, I'll say something that personally happened to me, but it's in line with advice I've gotten from my teachers. And of course, nothing's guaranteed to work, but being very kind and patient and generous, it's difficult in a conflict, but so I had a conflict with my own mother, and it was mostly due to mental illness. Like, she wasn't talking to me for a very long time, like 4 years. And I tried many, many things. And what eventually worked was just consistently just sending at a little bit of a distance, sending nice notes, just sending little notes and sending things that show you care, like things that I know she cared about, like she likes French pop music from the 1970s, things like that, funny things. And eventually, it's not guaranteed to work, but I was surprised that eventually it did work. That I do think kindness and love, generosity, patience, and it's very hard because often you have to do it when someone has been very rude and mean to you. But I could tell 25 stories. I'm sure Venerable Sangye Khadro could too, where this does actually work. It doesn't always work, but if you can do it and it's not a situation of serious trauma or abuse and so on, I do think that kindness, generosity, patience, and thoughtfulness in a measured way can work. But it was actually only after giving up any thought that it would ever work that it did eventually work. It did require that letting go also, because then you can do it in a light way without the expectation. Like, I'm actually just genuinely doing this because I think my mom will like it. Whether or not she ever talks to me again, it is okay. And then eventually it did work.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Scott.
I want to add something. What he said reminded me once a woman who came to one of my courses said that for years and years, she'd been trying to change her father. She wanted her father to change. She didn't like him the way he was and thought he needed to change. And she was constantly trying to get him to change, and nothing worked. Finally, she gave up. She said, okay, I give up. I'm not going to try to change him anymore. And from then on, he changed.
Yeah, no, it happens. It happens again and again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we only have a few more minutes left, I think about 5 minutes left, and Venerable Sangye Khadro has very kindly agreed to lead a meditation. So I just wanted to say a few closing words, which is thank you so much to our amazing presenters today, Scott and Venerable Sangye Khadro, for sharing such practical advice and help and inspiration. I've been really inspired by what I've heard today, and so practical in ways that we can work with our mind and be more compassionate to ourselves and others. So thank you both from my heart. So I'd like to close out the session by requesting Venerable Sangye Khadro to lead us in a meditation for the minutes that remain. Over to you, Venerable. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we've come together today because we are interested in this topic of compassion. And we all do have compassion. Compassion is a natural quality in our minds, in everybody's mind, in fact. So see if you can recall a time when you did feel compassion for another person, another being, or even a group of people. Try to get in touch with that state of mind, that feeling, that attitude of compassion, being moved, being touched by someone else's suffering. You see somebody in trouble, in need, and you just feel moved to help them. So bring to mind a situation like that. So research shows that compassion is good for us, good for our health, helps relieve stress, helps us to be happier and to get along better with others. So it's good for ourselves if we can have more compassion. And it's also good for others, because when we can treat others with compassion, they feel happier, they feel safer, and it's good for the world. The world would be much worse off if nobody had compassion. But in fact, people do have compassion. People do reach out and try to help others who are in need. So compassion is really, really important. So feel the wish to increase your own feeling of compassion and to make it more and more a part of your life, a part of your interactions with others. And a simple way of doing that is to just contemplate. Just like me, everybody wants to be happy and nobody wants to suffer. So every person and every living being, including animals, birds, insects, they're all just trying to live their life and keep themselves alive, take care of their families, and they don't want to suffer. They want to be happy. And then see if you can generate this strong, heartfelt wish, aspiration, that in the way you live your life, today and every day of your life, that you will act towards others in ways that at least try to bring happiness to them and try to relieve their suffering if you can. And at the very least, to not give them more suffering. So the Dalai Lama often says, try to help others as much as you can. And even if you can't help them, at least try not to harm them. So we're at the end of our time together, and traditionally in Buddhism, we dedicate the positive energy or merit that we create when we do a practice or listen to teachings, do something spiritual. We dedicate this that it will bring benefit, peace, and happiness to all living beings. So let's just take a moment to do that mentally. By the positive energy created during this hour of discussing compassion and meditation, may this positive energy spread out throughout the world, throughout the universe, reaching all living beings, relieving their suffering and their confusion, and bringing them genuine peace and happiness, and helping them get in touch with their positive nature, their positive potential, so that that can grow, bringing greater and greater peace and happiness into their lives.
Thank you so much, Venerable. Beautiful way to close our webinar. And thank you, everyone, for joining today.
Thanks for joining me for this dialogue with Venerable Sangye Khadro, organized by the Foundation for Compassion and Wisdom. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider making a donation to our podcast. A Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment is a nonprofit organization supported by donations that keep our content free and ad-free. To support us now, visit our website at skepticspath.org. We accept cash, credit, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies, and your donations are tax-deductible in the U.S. If you'd like to deepen this conversation, please join our newsletter or our social media accounts on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, where we can be found under the name Skeptic's Path. We also have a private meditation discussion group that you can join, which you'll find a link to at the bottom of our website. Thanks to Tara Anderson for producing and editing this episode, Christian Perry for audio mastering, and Isabella Acebal for marketing, digital production, and social media. We wish you a wonderful day.